Alright, so this week we've got the midterm. I've got a print drawn up and I'll have some parts cut up for you guys. You're actually going to fabricate up a part and weld it out. This is what it's going to look like. I'll put this on Moodle so you guys can check it out before class, but I'll have copies to hand out when class starts on Tuesday. It's going to be worth 25 points. It's going to be based on 3 categories, whether it's airtight, dimensional, and then quality of welds. So airtight, we're going to pressure test it, and that category is going to be worth 5 points. So for every air leak that pops up, that's 1 point subtracted. Dimensional will be worth 10 points. So every dimension that's over a 16th out of print, 1 point will be subtracted. And also the squareness of your weldment. So if it's out of square by more than a 16th of an inch, 1 point will be subtracted for every angle that's out. And lastly, quality of welds will be 10, so that'll just be visual appearance of your weldment. So we'll see how you guys do on that. So tools needed. The college doesn't have much for clamps or tape measures or squares, so if you guys can pick some of those up or bring them with you if you already have them. I picked up these 3-inch clamps at Harbor Freight for like $3. The main thing you need with the clamp is make sure you have it. Make sure it can at least open 1.5 inches just to make room for the tube and whatever you're clamping the tube to tack it out. You'll also need a square. Now, you can have a small one that goes on the inside, or if you just have a big one available, that's fine too. We'll just square it to the outside. And if you've got a square with a scale on it that you can use for the tape measure, you don't need to bring a tape measure. So this is essentially the project tacked out. And the midterm is just going to be this portion. And then for the final, we're going to finish this weldment. And what it's going to end up being is a TIG torch holder. So we'll have a threaded hole on this angle iron, and we'll have a fastener, kind of like a handle. And what we'll be able to do is clamp this down to the table, and we'll have some sheet metal that comes up so you can put your TIG torch in there and it'll hold it up so it's not falling on the ground and you don't have to put it over your lap. And we'll also have some holes drilled in it that you can stick your welding rod in or tungsten in. So should be a pretty nice little project when it's done. It'll be a handy tool to have so you're not fumbling around with all the stuff on your bench. So usually how I go about setting up, tacking up tubing and framework like this. I'm not sure if you guys have a lot of experience. If you don't, that's fine. But since the tables at Len Benton have a bunch of spatter on them, this is what I would do. I would take a plate that I know is flat, and I would clamp your pieces of tubing to it, and you can kind of knock them around until you get them square, and then you can tack it out, and then just kind of work your way around until you've got a square, or a rectangle in this case. What I usually do for tacking stuff out is I'll kind of jump around, so I'll put a tack on the outside, and then I'll come in here and put a tack. Then I'll tack the other outside corner, and then I'll tack this last. And then you'll take it out, and like I said, you'll just kind of keep working around that corner. So important thing to remember with framework is when you're tacking it up, it doesn't have to be perfectly square. A lot of the squareness you can fix with your weld process, how you weld it out, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I've got a little experiment here to show you guys what I'm talking about. But I made this little drawing, and these are kind of exaggerated just so you guys can see them. But so if you've got an angle that's too far open, depending where you start and end your weld, you can actually change the angle of this weldment. So for this one being open, if you start your weld from the outside and you end it on the inside, it's actually going to pull that angle in a little bit. And it does that because the end of your weld, you know, the end of the bead is going to be the hottest part of your weld. So depending where you end at, it's going to pull that joint further, whichever direction. So if you've got an angle that's too closed in, and you start your weld on the inside and you end it on the outside corner where all that heat's going to be, it's going to actually open up that angle. So usually what I do when I'm welding out, you know, something like this is I'll go around and I'll check all of the angles and I'll base how I'm going to weld it out on that. So usually whichever angle is the furthest out, that's where I'll start. So we'll say this angle's out the furthest. So I would start my welding here and end the weld depending on which way the angle needed to go. And I would jump over here, then I'd go here, and then I'd go here. I'd recommend welding this rectangle out before you tack this on. I just wanted to do this for appearance, but anyways. So after you jump around on this side, I'll flip it over and I'll weld out this side, do the same. Then I'll do these outside corners, and last welds I'll do is these inside fillets, and the reason for that is they pull the most, so I usually save those for last. So I've got a square here, or not a square, I've got an angle here, and I've tacked this up purposely out of squareness, just so you guys can see how much the weld is going to move this thing. So I'm hoping the camera can pick this up, but the angle's open about a 1/16 of an inch up here at the top. So hopefully the camera kind of catches that. So I've got a height gauge here that I've checked it with. Pretty high-tech setup here. So we've got it zeroed out right there, and when you go to this far corner, it's about so it's about 60 to 70 thousandths out, meaning this angle is open. So I'm going to fire up the welder. And since this angle is too far open, I'm going to start my welds on the outside and I'm going to end them on the inside. And that should pull in those angles and get it a lot closer. I'm not sure if it'll pull the full 1/16 of an inch in, but it should be pretty close. So let me strike up the welder. We'll do that real quick and see how it goes. welded out. I welded both these outside welds inward, so I'll have to wait for it to cool a little bit. Kind of let the weld do its thing. So I'll talk about the tubing we're using is inch by inch, and it's about 8th wall tubing, so you're going to want your amps around 125 when you're welding it out. What else do I got? So yeah, you'll want to, after you get these welded out and graded, you're going to want to hold on to them because we're going to need them for the final to finish. So just a reminder, you might be able to find a spot at the college so you guys don't have to lug them back home and they don't get misplaced. So we'll throw this angle up on there and we'll see what we've got. So it could move, but that ended up pulling in 45 thousandths of an inch. Wait, no, 35 thousandths of an inch. So it's still about 25 out, which it could end up it could pull in a little further since it's still pretty hot. It's not nearly as dramatic as it was when we started. So keep that in mind when you're welding these out. You want to make sure your dimensions are in print, because those aren't going to really move after you weld it. So make sure the dimensions are where they need to be. Angles are a little less important just because you can kind of fix them as you go along. So this weldment's cooled down quite a bit. See if it made it any further. About 25 thousandths. So when I started it was 60 to 70 thousandths out, so I was able to move it pretty far. I'd say 40 thousandths easily. So, you know, you can't use that technique if your angles are further out than that. It's not going to magically fix an 1/8 of an inch out, you know, out a square part. But it'll definitely let you manipulate 40 to 50 thousandths. And I'm pretty sure when I finish welding this inside fillet, it'll probably pull in the rest of the way. try that real quick. Trying to shield the camera here. So yeah, just remember for Tuesday, clamps, square, tape measure. Looks like I'm about out of tape here. Now it's about 15 thousandths out, so you can do quite a bit with the weld. Other than that, we'll catch you guys Tuesday.